Funding for Texas Monthly Talks is provided in part by Public Strategies Incorporated, managing campaigns for corporations around the clock, around the world, and J.P. Morgan Chase, the state's largest financial institution, serving large and small businesses, governments, schools, churches, and individual Texans just like you for more than 135 years, and the MFI Foundation, improving the quality of life within our community, and the Matson McHale Foundation, in support of public television, and also by the Alice Clayburgh Reynolds Foundation, proud to be a founding partner of Texas Monthly Talks, and viewers like you. Thank you.
I'm Evan Smith, the editor of Texas Monthly. If you need to be reminded how much the political landscape has changed in 2 years' time, consider this. When author, journalist, and consummate Beltway insider Mark Halperin was a guest on this program in the comparatively calm days of October 2005, we were discussing whether Texas powerhouse Tom DeLay could remain as House Majority Leader and keep his congressional seat. How long ago that seems, and how far away, by extension, we should regard the 2008 presidential election. It is, after all, more than 12 months until we elect George W. Bush's successor, and anything can happen. On the other hand, unlike in Hollywood, where the legendary screenwriter William Goldman famously said, "Nobody knows anything," this is Washington, where everybody knows everything. Prognostication's the game. So we invited Halperin back to help us divine wisdom, conventional and otherwise, about the campaign long in progress. You'll recall that the 42-year-old spent 19 years at ABC News, the last 10 as political director, guiding the network's coverage, breaking news and pontificating on TV and radio, and editing the daily must-read tip sheet known as The Note. Last year, Halperin and John F. Harris co-authored a book about the '08 race, The Way to Win, and Halperin has another one just out, The Undecided Voter's Guide to the Next President. A native of Bethesda, Maryland, a graduate of Harvard University, Halperin downgraded himself to ABC News political analyst in March, taking on similar responsibilities for Time Magazine and Time.com. He's a busy guy, always in motion, except for the next half hour. A conversation with Mark Halperin on this edition of Texas Monthly Talks. Simply do a version of that. This will be a fun night. Okay. I got the call. It's on the one. It's on PBS. Lewis. And then I stopped my show to get back to it, but it's okay. It's all right. Can I run this? Okay, everybody please take your seats. All right, good. Mark Halperin, good morning.
Good morning.
Or should I say, hello, Beltway Nostradamus.
Well, you know, people often call me a Beltway insider, Washington insider. I actually moved to Manhattan in New York on the Upper West Side about a decade ago. I like to say to be more in touch with the real lives of real people.
Right, much less elite,
so,
I'm sure.
Exactly. But, you know, you can in this age, internet age, you can keep up with what's going on in Washington from just about anywhere.
That's right. And I want to, let's go right there. Let's talk about what's happening in Washington. Today, more than a year until the election, still everyone's talking about what's going on. In Washington right now, the conventional wisdom about 2008 is what?
The conventional wisdom is that Hillary Clinton will be the Democratic nominee, that Barack Obama and John Edwards will put up months of fighting, but that they'll fall short, and that on the Republican side, the conventional wisdom is nobody knows what's going on. Right. That you've got 4 candidates who could be nominated, but the conventional wisdom is Hillary Clinton will be the next president.
Now, how much of that is what Karl Rove was accused of a few weeks ago, which is saying, oh, Hillary Clinton's going to win or the Democrats are going to win as a tool to just gin up the base?
Right. You know, Karl Rove is a careful man, and people said he must be saying it for a reason. I'm pretty confident he believes that to be true. He's not just saying it for political effect. I think in the White House for a long time they've thought she'd be the nominee.
But does Rove's point about her high negatives, which I think after the fact maybe turned out to be not exactly factually right, where he claimed she had the highest negatives of anybody going, does that have bearing on this? Does the fact that she has such high negatives pose a problem for her?
It does, and I think it remains her greatest vulnerability within the Democratic Party, not just because they're worried about her electability, because if you look at head-to-head polls, she's got a decent argument that she's as strong as any Democrat. It's more about the desire to have someone who can unite the country. And the question is, can someone who has high negatives and whose last name is Clinton, is that the best person in governing to bring the country together and have an end of the 16 years of very divisive Clinton and Bush presidencies? A couple things. One is, in the Senate, she's not been a divisive figure. She's been one of the most bipartisan figures during her time in Washington.
Right.
Two, as I said, she's ahead in those head-to-head polls. Three, a lot of people in the Democratic Party look at the George Bush experience and say, we want a divisive figure. We want someone who will rally liberals. Now, Hillary Clinton has not always been liberals' favorite candidate,
right,
but divisiveness and sort of someone who is hated by Republicans, that's attractive to a lot of Democratic voters.
Well, let's drill down into that for a second, because if she has not been divisive in the Senate, if she's been a senator who has tended to be more bipartisan than not, what is the argument against her, except for she was married to that guy?
Within the Democratic Party?
Within the general election.
Well, within the general election, I think the argument against her most broadly would be that she's a guilt by association with her husband, right, and traits that people don't want. Divisive, because even though she's been bipartisan in the Senate, she's still seen by many people as a divisive figure. And also too calculating, too scheming. The image of the Clintons as people who don't do principled things but do politically expedient things. And then finally, there'll be a lot of Americans who say she's simply too liberal, that although she poses, in their view, as a moderate, that she's a traditional tax and spend, weak on defense liberal.
Right. Has she been misleading about her positions during this campaign? Has she shaded the edges of her positions?
Not particularly. I mean, all politicians do to some extent, but I can't think of anything on which her rhetoric is divorced from either her record or her proposals.
Has her position on Iraq, which people assumed would be her greatest vulnerability in policy terms going into the campaign, proved to be as great a vulnerability?
It's not been as big an issue as I think people thought for a number of reasons, mostly because campaigns are about the future, and she has done a good job of talking about what she wants to do going forward in Iraq.
Right.
Senator Obama, as a candidate who says, I'm a future-oriented candidate, you can only talk about the past so long if you're a candidate of the future. I think every day that goes by when Democrats are focused on changing George Bush's policy that they don't like, her past vote and how she handled it becomes less of a factor.
Less relevant. Let me stay within the Democrats for a second. You mentioned Obama. What happened? We heard coming out of the first quarter fundraising and then the second quarter fundraising, he's now a legitimate alternative to Clinton. The money is there.
Right.
And he's now giving people permission who are kind of on the fence about her to move over to his side. But it seems to have plateaued or even fallen off a little bit.
Well, make no mistake that he's still a strong candidate in this race. He's still the most likely to beat her.
You don't write him off.
You don't write him off.
Yeah.
I think a couple things have happened. First of all, she's made very few mistakes. And front runners who don't make mistakes tend to stay strong. She's exceedingly strong with women. Any woman candidate in a Democratic primary fight with all males running against her is going to have an advantage. And she's doing a very good job of bringing in female support, and she's got, because it's a presidential race, the historic first possibility. They do a very good job of stoking that.
Right.
Women, older women who want to see a woman president before they die, younger women who want the inspirational role model. She's done a good job with that, and that's hurt Senator Obama. He also has got...
But he's a first. I mean, that's the part that I've not been able to... And frankly, Richardson is a first.
Yes, there's a lot of firsts, but women make up such a huge percentage of the electorate in a Democratic primary fight, nomination fight. That's a big help. Finally, he's made mistakes. He argues that the foreign policy statements he made over a series of weeks that were controversial showed bold new ways of thinking about America's role in the world. Willingness to meet with foreign leaders, willingness to use force in Pakistan, a willingness to use nuclear weapons. The critics control a lot of the debate at this stage. They're the elite people in media and politics. They had judged those statements to not be bold and new and interesting, but naive and misguided. And Senator Clinton used the word naive one of the few times she's directly criticized him. And I think that has hurt him, and it's cut to the biggest problem he faces in this race. I think the sole problem that will make or break him, which is he ready to be president from day one, particularly on national security? And that's, I think, has set him back somewhat and stalled him in the polls in most places.
Despite the fact that after he said those things and after Senator Clinton criticized him, somebody pulled up YouTube video of Senator Clinton saying very similar things in the Senate. And she tried to finesse it by saying, well, I was a senator then. I'm a presidential candidate now. There's a difference.
Right. She was asked about that in a debate in Iowa that ABC News sponsored, and her answer was not particularly compelling, the difference between being a senator and a candidate. Life's not fair. Politics isn't fair. She probably should have suffered a bit more for that politically than she did. But her operation is just more deft. Sometimes in politics, you got to step back and say and sort of pay professional homage to the finessing and handling of things, and her operation handled that pretty well.
To the question of Obama's plausibility on national security, I heard you speak last night here at Austin, and you made a really interesting point about the downside of Oprah Winfrey's endorsement of Obama in terms of what it says about Obama and what it doesn't say. I wonder if you talk about that.
Sure. I think his biggest challenge is convincing people he's ready from day one.
Right.
He talks about his experience, not the normal experience we've had in a president. He's only recently been in federal office. He was a state senator, community activist. He talks about a range of life experiences that he says makes him ready. There's some skepticism amongst elites and amongst voters about that. And I think what he needs more is the endorsement of military leaders, retired military leaders. Oprah's endorsement helped him raise money, help him become better known, which he still needs to do. But I think it almost works at cross purposes to his big challenge, because Oprah conveys celebrity and excitement. Barack Obama doesn't
He's got
need
that down
He's got
already.
celebrity and excitement. And I think the more he's seen as a pop cultural figure, the more it undermines exactly what he needs most, which is a sense of stature and readiness. And I think it undermines the core problem he
So
has.
Hillary Clinton goes on Ellen DeGeneres, and that's okay. But he goes on Oprah, and that's not okay.
That's right. I think her problem for a lot of people is she wants to seem likable and accessible and real. She can afford to do that because one of the most interesting things about the Democratic race is if you had said 5 years ago, 10 years ago, pretty much any time, what will be the biggest problem for the first credible female presidential candidate? Everyone would have said, are they tough enough on national security?
Right.
That is off the table for interesting reasons for Hillary Clinton. No one is questioning whether she's ready to be commander-in-chief. In fact, it's her biggest strength in this fight, and probably in a general election, she'd stand up pretty well against
She worked very hard in the Senate to establish that credibility, right?
Served on the Armed Services Committee, very active, traveling around the world, meeting with senior military leaders and more junior ones. If you talk to national security figures, both civilians and military in the Pentagon, they will tell you almost to a person they're exceedingly comfortable with Senator Clinton. They respect her. They respect the time she's put in understanding national security, defense policy issues. It's a big plus for her, particularly against Senator Obama. And like I said, surprisingly, I think if you were worried about the Democrats' credibility on national security in a general election, you'd say she's the strongest of the three major candidates.
Very quickly, Edwards and the others, but particularly Edwards, they're going to be bridesmaids in all likelihood in this ceremony.
The races are not symmetrical in terms of several factors. Most important, Iowa. And the Democratic race, it's all about Iowa. The winner of the Iowa caucuses will be in an extraordinarily strong position. If it's either Clinton or Obama, most people I talk to think they'll be the nominee.
Run the
they'll
table.
Win Iowa, they'll win New Hampshire, they'll be the nominee. John Edwards is staking his campaign on Iowa. He denies that as he must, but he's putting everything he has into a state where he finished second 4 years ago, where he spent a lot of time. And I think if you look at Bill Richardson, Joe Biden, Chris Dodd, they understand the importance of Iowa. They don't need to win Iowa, but they'd like to finish in the top three.
Why didn't Edwards inherit more of the Howard Dean enthusiasm, the audience, the passion? Is it Obama just sucked all that energy away?
I think Senator Edwards would like to be the change candidate, but he is the other change candidate because Barack Obama, not just in his message, but in his very presence, both literally and figuratively, he's the face of change. And that makes it hard for Senator Edwards, but he's been very smart in a variety of ways of staying in the debate. He's raised less money. He's not as well known. His poll numbers are lower, except in Iowa, where he's strong. He's stayed in the debate through very aggressive policy proposals on Iraq in particular, but also on health care, welfare, taxes, and he has driven the debate in an impressive manner.
Okay, well, let's move over to the Republicans, but stay in Iowa. You have said that it matters for the Democrats who wins Iowa, but in all likelihood, Iowa is not going to be definitive for the Republicans.
Probably not definitive, but a big deal. You've got Mitt Romney leading in the polls there, putting in a lot of effort. A question mark about how much effort Fred Thompson's putting in. A question mark now about how much John McCain is putting in, putting much more of an emphasis on New Hampshire because of his limited resources and successful track record there. Rudy Giuliani, some people questioned his commitment to Iowa. He's going for Iowa because if he can, as the sole moderate on some issues and as a national security candidate, if he can win the Iowa caucuses, which is not out of the question, I think he'll be the nominee. It'll be such a big story for a former liberal New York mayor to win. So Iowa will be competitive, but winning Iowa does not guarantee New Hampshire.
Why is a pro-gay rights, pro-gun control, thrice married, former mayor of New York a former liberal? Why is he not a current liberal?
Did I say former liberal?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Freudian
Is it
slip.
the former New Yorker?
Well, he is downplaying his liberal, his positions on liberal issues.
Right.
Early on, before he'd formally entered the race and talking to some of his advisors, they said if he enters this race, he will make an argument that the party needs to be a bigger tent, that the Republican Party needs to accept people in it who are pro-choice on abortion, who are pro-gay rights, pro-gun control. He has not done that for whatever reason. He's downplayed those issues. What he said is, in effect, I'm a conservative on economics for lower taxes and smaller government and less regulation. I'm a conservative on national security, pursue the president's policies in Iraq, battle the war on terror, or as he calls it, the terrorist war on us. And he sort of ignores these other issues. When they come up, he finesses them, tries to downplay them. He has moved on issues like immigration, abortion, gun control, taken different positions now than he did as mayor. Some success. I think people appreciate him. He can walk into any bar in America, be recognized, get a standing ovation, and people will offer to buy him a drink.
Right. But does he not have a sort of similar to Hillary Clinton within his own party, high enough negatives in certain quarters? People will say, I couldn't vote for Rudy Giuliani under any circumstances. Doesn't that pose a problem for him if he's the general election candidate?
If he's the general election candidate, if a more conservative candidate can get on the ballot, in some states or all states, that pose a potential problem. He argues that it's not a problem, that conservatives will say, particularly if it's Giuliani Clinton,
Hillary,
we may not agree with the Mayor Giuliani on some issues, but we don't want Hillary
So we're going to hold our nose and vote for him.
And he argues that he would put states like California and New Jersey and New York in play because of his more moderate positions.
You believe that?
I'm skeptical about it for a variety of reasons. I think there'd be more anger and disappointment on the right. And I think that liberals would prefer the real liberal to someone who's liberal in some ways. But it will depend on how he emerged as the nominee. If he becomes the Republican nominee, it's going to be a real moment of reckoning for the party where they say, is this someone we're comfortable gathering around? Part of the reason that the Republican nomination fight is so unsettled right now is none of the four candidates have consolidated a decent chunk of the conservative base of the party the way George Bush did, the way Bob Dole did, the way George Bush the elder did, the way Ronald Reagan did.
To what degree does the problem that Giuliani had as mayor prior to 9/11 become a factor in this race? In other words, people have said that on 9/10, Giuliani might not have been reelected mayor of New York.
That's right.
Why has that not been more of an issue in this campaign?
None of the Republican candidates have taken him on in a serious way. None of the Democrats have taken him on in a serious way.
One imagines yet.
Yet. Well, that's the question. There have not been very many negative attacks. The assumption amongst all the Republicans was between the press accounts and Giuliani's own behavior on the campaign trail, he will disappear from this race.
Right.
They ruled out, as I did and many others, that he could be nominated. Now, he's strong, and every day that goes by and people don't take him out, he's a day closer to being the nominee, leading in the national polls, doing well in fundraising, doing well in some key early states. I think that someone will take him on. Some of the issues you talked about will come up. What's been most impressive to me about the mayor's performance and a big contributor to his staying strong in the polls is he's not shown anger on the campaign trail. He's not lashed out at people or been drawn into divisive fights with voters or with reporters. Even when asked about his family situation, which makes him obviously and understandably uncomfortable, even when asked about issues like guns and abortion. We'll see attacks on him, and we'll see how he handles them, and we'll see how voters respond.
That's right. Thompson has not had an auspicious entry into this race, has he?
He has not. They make a big point of saying two things about his candidacy, his advisors, and Thompson himself. One is he's not going to play by the rules established by the chattering class and the conventional wisdom, and that he's going to be the candidate of big ideas and big solutions. On the second point, he's laid nothing on the line. He's offered no specifics on the big challenges facing the country that are the least bit distinctive from what the conventional lines are within the party. And on the first point, you can say you're not going to play by the rules, but to some extent you have to. The rules exist for a reason.
Right.
The people in Iowa expect certain things. The people in New Hampshire, the national media, members of the Republican Party. He has not kept an aggressive schedule. Some people said he needed to dispel this notion that he's not
lazy.
That he's lazy. Yeah. He's doing one or two events a day. Some days he does no events at all. done maybe private fundraisers, but no public events. If they truly think that you can completely ignore what the conventional wisdom says and still break through the voters in the internet age, I think they're wrong. There's certain things you have to do that they've not done, and it's hurt his credibility. Some conservative columnists of note have written pieces, scathing pieces, on both points, on how hard he's working or not working, and whether he's got any original ideas that are big and important and interesting.
So the big threat to Giuliani maybe isn't Thompson, but instead the person who may ultimately be the nominee if Giuliani's not, and that's Romney?
I think both Romney and McCain. I'm
going to be curious to hear you make a case for McCain still being viable as a nominee.
Well,
at this point,
if you took away the memory of national political reporters, if you gave all the candidates an equal amount of money,
right,
and made them all equally well known, and what they had were their personalities and their issue positions and their biographies, John McCain would be a very strong candidate. He's got the most experience on national security. He's the only one who's run before, which is often a big advantage.
Right.
And he's got a bond with people on the ground in New Hampshire. I think that
and also independents and even some Democrats.
That was his image before. He would need to recapture that because
still, been on Jon Stewart 12 times.
Yes, he goes back and forth. Just basically, his life is going on Meet the Press and the Daily
Jon
Show,
Stewart,
back and forth. I think that he is going to look for an opening to reignite this campaign, and I think he may find it because of the weakness of the field overall. Mitt Romney's strength right now is leading the polls in Iowa, leading New Hampshire, and great personal wealth that will allow him to write a check. He's already done some of this when he needs it to be on the air with television ads. And I think, like I said, I wouldn't say that each of them has a 25% chance of winning the nomination, but I'm pretty close to that.
Yeah. McCain would have to really be Doug Flutie at this point, wouldn't he?
What if he wins the New Hampshire primary?
But didn't he win? He won a New Hampshire primary. I seem to remember once before.
He did, but he was running against a strong, well-funded front runner who had an incredible national operation, and people rallied around him, and he consolidated that conservative base. Yeah. In New Hampshire, McCain won because independents can vote there, and he drew a lot of them in. I won't say he's got as good a chance as the other three.
But you don't write him off.
I don't write him off at all, and I think in a field this unsettled, he brings some strengths to it that are unmatched by the others.
Okay, we're in the 3 minutes left speed round period of the show.
Time for a quick game of Parcheesi.
That's it. Who would be the strongest Republican general election candidate against Hillary Clinton?
Impossible to say.
Can't say.
I think if I had to say, I would say John McCain.
Because would be the strongest against Hillary Clinton.
I believe so, but I don't feel strongly about it because I think we have a lot to learn about these candidates in the next couple months.
Okay. You're not prepared to say right now it's going to be Hillary Clinton and X in the fall.
If you asked me, forced me to pick, I'd say Mitt Romney because I think he has a slightly better chance than the others because of his strength in Iowa and New Hampshire.
Does President Bush, who we've not even name-checked in this whole half hour, enter into this race in any way?
Well, he does because he creates the environment on Iraq in particular in which the campaign will run. It seems like he plans to have a large number of American troops on the ground, but he'll go a long way towards framing the question of, if you want change in this election, can you vote for a Republican and get change? All the Republicans hope so because they believe the voters are looking for change.
Will the Republican nominee want to campaign with President Bush?
As of today, selectively. Not in every state in the union, but selectively, sure.
Right. Will the Republican nominee actively run away from President Bush on Iraq or other big issues?
I think that because it is so uncommon in this country's history to have a two-term president succeeded by a member of their own party, particularly when the incumbent is unpopular, I think you will see a nominee, no matter who it is, any of the four Republicans, once they've secured the nomination effectively, look for opportunities to distance themselves. And you've already seen some of that, but I think you'll see a decent amount more.
John Murtha predicted the other day the Democrats might win as many as 40 or 50 House seats in the next election. True or false?
That they could?
He believes that they will. I think he was predicting that they would win 40 to 50.
Yeah, it's a great political philosopher, Yogi Berra, says prediction is difficult, especially about the future. I think it's hard to imagine that many, but not impossible.
Every day it seems another Republican is retiring,
and that makes it much more likely. You know, Republicans are now apparently willing to go into the 2008 election as they did 2006 with the American people majority very unhappy with the Iraq war and wanting change and feeling they need a Congress that can bring that about. And because the current Democratic-controlled Congress doesn't have the votes to do it, I think you could see Republicans lose a lot of seats.
So Democrats pick up seats for sure in the House. Question of how many?
As of today, without question. And those
Senate?
retirements add to that. Senate, I think Democrats, as of today, would pick up seats. You've got a number of Republican incumbents in places in blue states, places like New Hampshire, Minnesota, Maine, who certainly are worried that the war environment and their record of voting in support of President Bush's position will hurt them with the voters. But there's still time for them to help themselves. I don't know that the Democrats' chances in the Senate to increase are overwhelming, but today they'd pick up at least a few.
Okay. We're out of time.
Okay.
You'll come back after the election, and we'll see how you did.
That'd be excellent.
Okay, Mark. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.
Funding for Texas Monthly Talks is provided in part by Public Strategies Incorporated, managing campaigns for corporations around the clock, around the world, and J.P. Morgan Chase, the state's largest financial institution, serving large and small businesses, governments, schools, churches, and individual Texans just like you for more than 135 years, and the MFI Foundation, improving the quality of life within our community, and the Matson McHale Foundation, in support of public television, and also by the Alice Clayburgh Reynolds Foundation, proud to be a founding partner of Texas Monthly Talks, and viewers like you. Thank you.
If you had said 5 years ago, 10 years ago, pretty much any time, what will be the biggest problem for the first credible female presidential candidate? Everyone would have said, are they tough enough on national security?
Right.
That is off the table for interesting reasons for Hillary Clinton. No one is questioning whether she's ready to be commander-in-chief. In fact, it's her biggest strength. Rudy Giuliani, if he can win the Iowa caucuses, which is not out of the question, I think he'll be the nominee.